Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I'll be providing my review of the book Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive series. The first portion of my review will be spoiler-free, and the second portion of my review will have spoilers. It will be a long spoiler section because, boy, do I have thoughts on this book. But a lot of my thoughts on the book I can't reveal without going into the spoilers. So I will get into those eventually. But first off, I'll start with my spoiler-free. And I should begin by saying that I've read most of the Stormlight, in fact, all of the Stormlight Archive and the other Cosmere novels in the mass market paperback format. And I really wanted to wait until the mass market paperback of Rhythm of War came out to read it. I actually just got into the Cosmere right around the time that Rhythm of War released. I actually was reading Oathbringer the same month that Rhythm of War released in hardcover, and I didn't want to buy it in hardcover, so I waited and waited, and it came out in trade paperback, and I thought I would have to wait another year to get it in mass market. So I said, all right, I'm just going to break down, buy the trade paperback, I need to know what happens. And so I did, and I got it discounted, and it was a good book. And then, right as I finished the book, I went to the bookstore, and the mass market paperback of the book had just come out that day. So I was like, well, guess I'm gonna get two copies, because the mass market now matches my collection, but the hardcover matches is what I read it in, and it was a very different experience. I actually had to have this pad that I put underneath the book, and I would flop it down on the pad so that my arms wouldn't get too tired holding the book, because this is a massive book. You know, Daniel Green on his channel always does the book slaps. Well, this one you can tell just how big it is. It's a massive trade paperback, which is why I like the mass markets as well. But there's differences between the two. I like how floppy this is. Ooh, it's very floppy. So getting into my spoiler-free thoughts, I absolutely loved Way of Kings, but I did not know what to expect with it. I absolutely loved Words of Radiance. Favorite book in the series, one of my favorite Cosmere books. It's a fantastic book. Loved it. And the climax of this book is fantastic. Then Oathbringer had the best flashbacks, but I didn't love the main story quite as much, and I thought the ending, it felt like the kitchen sink was thrown in. It was too much. Too much. What's the meme from Incredibles? Too much, darling, too much. So I was very excited to read Rhythm of War, but I'd heard a few things that Sanderson had put into this book that made me nervous. I was nervous that I would not enjoy Rhythm of War that much, and I'll just say those warnings were wrong. I absolutely loved Rhythm of War. Fantastic entry into the series. My personal rating for it is a 9.7 out of 10. Not as good as Words of Radiance. Really close to Way of Kings, but I think Way of Kings is a little bit better, but for sure it is better than Oathbringer, which I thought was the weakest of the entry thus far. And I'll go into more specific details in my spoiler review. In my spoiler-free, I will reveal that I really liked the Shallan storyline with Adolin. I really liked the Kaladin storyline, and I liked the character of Navani, but I had problems with her storyline. So, those are my spoiler-free thoughts, not giving anything away there, but this book has so much spoilers, I have to get into them. So, if you have not read Rhythm of War, I would encourage you not to watch this, unless you just love reading books, spoiler reviews, without actually having read the book. Anyway, going into spoilers right now for the rest of the video. So, going into the spoilers of Rhythm of War, boy do I have thoughts. The first thought I will start with is Shallan. I really enjoyed Shallan in the first two books of the Stormlight Archive. I loved her wittiness, I loved her backstory, I loved the complexity about her, I loved her red hair, I loved so much about her as a character. But in Oathbringer, Sanderson, and I guess it's technically introduced in Words of Radiance, but really is introduced in Oathbringer. Brandon Sanderson introduces the concept of Shallan having dissociative identity disorder, or DID. And I was not a fan of that, and it was one of the things that dragged Oathbringer down for me. But I heard that he actually had consultants involved and that he was really focused on DID in this book. And I was apprehensive because I didn't like reading about it. I understand why Sanderson took the time to focus on DID, but it was not an enjoyable storyline. It was not something I wanted to read about if I could have a choice. And I have to say, I was very pleased with what he did in this book. Shallan has the three personalities, Shallan, Veil, and Radiant, and they all are very different, and there is a push and pull between them that happens in this book, where Radiant and Veil really want Shallan to basically reveal everything to Adolin, and Shallan does not want to. Shallan is so embarrassed about her past and afraid that Adolin won't love her. And it's part of why I love Adolin so much, because that doesn't matter to him. But Shallan is so worried, and so she keeps focusing on these new personalities and even makes a new personality, Formless, in this book, which is really just Shallan, not really a new personality. And I have to say, I thought it was so well done. The chapter, my favorite single chapter in the book, probably, it was a couple. One of my favorite chapters in the book was this chapter where Shallan is prepared to go either extort or kill the judge, and she's so ready to do it, and Veil talks her down, and Veil convinces her to be willing to release the identity of Veil. You reveal that Veil is just a veil of Shallan, and basically Shallan absorbs the personality of Veil, or Veil just disappears, and so it just goes down to Shallan and Radiant. And I really liked that because it showed growth on Shallan's part. It showed Sanderson being willing to start to wrap up the whole DID storyline, but still do it respectfully. I thought it was very respectfully done. So I thought all of that storyline was really great. Just reading her finally being willing to admit everything to Adolin was really good, even though I don't think she actually admitted everything to him, which was weird. So I was worried about the Shallan storyline, and I actually quite enjoyed it. So that was my first point. My next point is Adolin. And I do not understand why people don't like my boy Adolin. By the way, I do like the artwork on this book, and specifically on the back with Adolin. I don't understand why people don't like him. He is probably the character I identify with most, and the character that I like the most. He is a very fun individual, very likable. He's very helpful. He's very understanding, and yet he gets so much hate in the community. I think that there are so many Shallan and Kaladin shippers that they were disappointed that Adolin got in the middle and ended up winning. And I really like Adolin's help with Kaladin. The scene where he basically forces Kaladin to go have camaraderie with him and Shallan, and actually once Shallan and Adolin leave, Kaladin actually says, I actually kind of miss hanging out with them. And you as the reader are like, yes, it finally worked. Kaladin wants to be around people. And I really like how Adolin is always needling him, calling him Bridge Boy, trying to get a rise out of him, to try to cause reactions, to get to know him better, to get to be with Kaladin. And then he is so there for Shallan. It's so great. I loved all of that storyline. I also loved he has the heroic sacrifice, the sacrificial love, that he's willing to go on trial for a crime he did not commit, and he's willing to put down his life, essentially. They're not going to execute him, but they're probably going to put him away for a life sentence in Shadesmar, which is basically a very different realm than Roshar, and he's willing to give up his life so that everyone else has a chance to live. That's a very good trope in storytelling. It is a very good trope in this book. I loved everything with Adolin in this book, and there were entire parts of the book where he's just missing. He's just not there. And I was like, no, go back to Adolin, go back to Adolin. And we didn't. I was really surprised by that, that I would feel that way. So I really enjoyed Adolin in this book. Going through to the next storyline I'll talk about is the Shadesmar plot as a whole. It actually reminded me of the whole trial in the other Brandon Sanderson book that he wrote, Towers of Midnight, one of the last books, the penultimate book of The Wheel of Time. In Towers of Midnight, you have the kind of trial plot where Perrin is put on trial with the White Cloaks for a crime that technically he did commit it, but it's not really a crime. It was not his fault. And it's very much an unfair trial, and it's rigged from the start. In this book, you have Adolin going on trial in a rigged trial, which I really liked. The way that they paralleled each other. Both are very excellent. I think that because that was book 13 of The Wheel of Time, we felt a little bit more invested in Perrin than we did in Adolin, but still, it was really well done here, and I liked the mirror of that. Next, I'll get to Navani. I loved Navani in this book. Navani is a character that I didn't care too much for. It wasn't like I disliked her, I just didn't care too much. The primary thing I liked about Navani was her relationship with Dalinar. I thought they made a very nice couple, and I really liked the dynamic that they had of her being a widow and everything that she's gone through, everything that he's gone through, and basically the where they are in their age. You wouldn't expect a romance between people of their age, and yet you still get it, and it was really sweet. And I like she has the prologue in this book, which was really fascinating. I hope that we get just like all the prologues condensed into one book once all 10 are done. I think that would be quite entertaining to read them all and see all the different perspectives. But I liked her prologue, and then I also really liked her her storyline of battling inside the tower. She basically, when Urithiru is taken over, she's in charge of it, and she's trying to slowly work against the fused, work against the enemy. And I really like the way she needles her way through, and all the twists and turns with her plot line. Oh boy, does she have a lot of twists and turns in this book that I really liked. She also has probably the best line in the book, which I can't give away because it's actually a swear word. But her line towards the end that she says to Moash was hilarious, and like a yeah moment. Very much the line that Mrs. Weasley gives to Bellatrix at the end of Harry Potter. That's what that reminded me of. So I really liked Navani in this book. The one thing about Navani's storyline I didn't like is with the magic system, it's the convoluted nature of the magic system, which I will leave that for my negatives towards the end of my points. But that was one thing about Navani's storyline I didn't much care for. I will piggyback off of that and talk about the flashbacks of this book. The flashbacks of this book feature Venli and Eshonai, and their time before Venli has joined the enemy army, before Eshonai is disappeared, and I'm going to be honest, didn't care for them as characters before, and didn't care for them in the flashbacks. I did enjoy Venli in this book in the main timeline. Whenever she showed up in the Tower of Urithiru, I really liked what was happening with her. But the flashbacks did nothing. And really, this book, because I feel like Navani gets the most page time she's ever had, and also probably she and Kaladin have the most page time in the book in general, I think that it should have been Navani's flashback book, and it would have made more sense, it would have worked with the prologue, it would have worked as a whole. And yet, it's not her book, and I think that's one of the weaknesses of that this book has, is that it's not Navani's. Still, it was still a fun read, it was still well done, I would have preferred Navani have the flashbacks. Now we get into Kaladin, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is the best we've ever seen Kaladin. I was so mad at Kaladin in Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. I understood how beaten down and how tragic his story was in those two books, but I was kind of fed up with him because I knew Dalinar and Adolin were good guys, and I wanted him to trust them and trust Elhokar and forgive people and whatnot, and he was so frustrating. And I liked him a lot more in Oathbringer, but he was still pretty down and out in Oathbringer. But in Rhythm of War, he is at his best. He has this realization in the book that the best way to help his fellow soldiers who have PTSD is to talk with them about it. The best thing he can do is put them all together and have shared experiences. And I loved that in this book. I also loved the discussions he has with his dad regarding pacifism and whether or not fighting actually saves lives. Those were great conversations. I loved the big struggle that he had. The struggle of, he feels like he just should give up because he feels he's not doing well enough. And when he gets benched by Dalinar, it even makes him even more down and out. And I thought that his recovery towards the end of the book was really good. I also really loved the story that Wit tells him, which is the story of the dragon and the dog. I thought that was a superbly written story. I hope that gets turned into a little kid's picture book because it was superbly done. I love it when Wit shows up. He's just so funny. So I really did enjoy Kaladin's storyline quite a lot. What's my next point? Okay, so Dalinar, Yasna, and Wit really are barely in the book at all. And when they are in the book, they have some pretty sweet, awesome scenes. But they're barely in the book, which makes me hopeful that they'll have more potential in the next book. I keep saying, I hope we get more Yasna, whatever, however you pronounce it. I hope we get more of her in the next book, and then we don't get much of her. And I hope she's the point of view character. I hope that she's the main character, but hasn't happened yet. But what can you do? But now I'm going into my biggest problems with the book. So I've been talking about some pretty big spoilers, but boy am I about to spoil some things in this next part. So you need the red flashing, hey, spoilers are coming right here, like the turn back. So first thing I'll talk about is Wit reveals that Thaidakar, or however you pronounce that, is Kelsier. And that reveal went completely over my head. I was so frustrated about the way I had to look it up because I didn't realize what was happening. He doesn't even use the words Kelsier in the book. He refers there are some loose references made to him that I would never have gotten. I'm going to read from my notes because I want to get this right. That I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't looked up on the Coppermind website. He uses the term Lord of Scars and references that Wit had punched the Lord of Scars previously. He was one of the only people to ever do so. And apparently, when you combine Lord of Scars with the context of Wit punching him, you're supposed to know, that's Kelsier, because Kelsier had scars, and the only person to ever beat Kelsier around was Wit. I didn't remember that. That went. I've read all the Cosmere books. I've read the Mistborn books. I've read Elantris, read Warbreaker. I would not have known if I hadn't looked it up. And I understand why the characters would change names, but there is a principle when you have an expanded universe, when you have multiple projects interweaving, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Marvel or DC. You want to make it in such a way that people who have read everything are rewarded. But if you haven't read everything, you're able to be filled in more. And I'm someone who's read everything, but I haven't read everything multiple times, and yet I still didn't understand that this was Kelsier. And I think that Brandon Sanderson should have just made it the reveal that, oh, this is Kelsier. Like, he should have outright stated it. Just going around it and making you have to infer was not the right move. I was very frustrated with that. And there are other characters that this happens with as well, like Zahel, who it turns out is Vasher. And I didn't piece that out until I went to the Copper Mine either. And if I had never gone to Copper Mine, just wouldn't have mattered. That's an original character. Like, how am I supposed to pick out these tiny details is so frustrating. And I wish he would just be more transparent about that. So that's enough on that little rant that I had. The next big problem I had was the magic system. The magic system in these books is getting out of control. I love a good hard magic system. Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author. I've loved all his books. But man, is the magic system getting out of control. I really liked, one of my favorite book series is The Rune Lords, which is all a hard magic system. And I like Elantris and Warbreaker, which have good hard magic systems. But the problem is that those hard magic systems are pretty well defined. And they're easy to understand, they're easy to follow, and there's not too many rules that are introduced. There are multiple magic systems in Rhythm of War and in the whole Stormlight Archive, and there are so many rules that you are learning, and so many rules that you're supposed to keep remembering, and there's so many rules that have yet to be revealed, and it's just so complex and so hard to keep up with. And I read the story for the plot and the characters, those two things. I don't really read it for the world building necessarily, although sometimes it's a nice touch. And when you have so much detail about the magic system. This is why I didn't like all of Navani's storyline. I liked Navani, but I didn't like her storyline because I felt like I was being bombarded with facts and with information about the magic system that I just couldn't keep up with it, and I was very, very frustrated by that. So it's just too much. Sanderson needs to dial it down in the next couple books. But going back to the positives, I did like the flow of this book. The climax of this book is much smaller and shorter than the climax of Oathbringer. The climax of Oathbringer was something around like 300 or 400 pages. It was incredibly long, and it felt like Endgame on steroids, that he was just throwing every single thing into the battle, and all these new things are introduced, all these new characters, all these new weapon systems, and Lift shows up, and blah, blah, blah. Everything was like just thrown in. This book, it's really Kaladin is in the climax, and Navani's in the climax, and maybe Teft, and the other Bridge 4 people. And then there is stuff happening with Dalinar, but it's not that exciting. It's smaller scale, and there's stuff happening in Shadesmar, but again, smaller scale, but the big stuff is Kaladin and Navani. And because it had that focus in the climax, it felt faster, it felt more fun to read, it did not feel as exhaustive, and I was able to read it more quickly than I did the other books. So I really enjoyed the climax of this book, which was a solid climax. And I wish that more people liked it, because I think that it's not as big. A lot of people feel like not as much happened, but quite a lot of character moments happened that I quite enjoyed. I thought it was very fun. And Taravangian, I totally skipped over him. He was a lot of fun, but he was barely in this book. But he is the concept of the old man who's kind of losing his memory, but at the same time, he's also at times brilliantly smart, and also his whole struggle with odium, all that stuff, was really interesting, and I really liked it. As I alluded to earlier, I really liked this book. It's setting up the Cosmere. It's setting up Book 5. I'm super excited for it, and I think that Brandon Sanderson has done something really special here. But I had a few problems, so it's not a top-tier Cosmere book for me. But still an excellent, excellent book, and I cannot wait to read The Lost Metal later this year and more. In fact, I should point out that after reading this book, I went to the store and bought 2 books. I bought Arcanum Unbounded and Dawnshard because I wanted to understand the background. I wanted to understand more of the Cosmere and see if I could try to understand the connections that happened. So this book made me go buy more of his books and want to read more. So good on you, Brandon. You're doing a good job with this. So overall, loved this book. 9.7 out of 10. Solid entry. If you've read Rhythm of War, let me know your comments down in the comments section below. Let me know if you loved this book, if you didn't love this book, what your opinions are. And let me know maybe a ranking idea. I will have a new Cosmere ranking coming out soon. So let me know all your thoughts down in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.